over the numerous discrepancies and unanswered questions surrounding the case. How would any parent feel if faced with our situation? After Derek dropped us off at the airport for our return back to Michigan, we had no idea that we were hugging our son for the last time. Photos and facts point to a violent altercation that occurred on the patio, as evidenced by the broken triple pane glass windows and other damages, but police failed to see any significance to the altercation, as well as Derek's assault report that was on record. Marino was the last person to see Derek alive and the first to find him dead. We will never give up seeking truth and justice for Derek. Despite going through 3 Pasadena police chiefs and their internal affairs department, all has fallen on deaf ears, with the exception of one man. My name is Etter Deal, mother to Derek Michael Deal, our eldest and only son, age 38, whose death was untimely and tragic in Pasadena, Texas on July 15th, 2023. Derek grew up in Michigan, and he graduated from college in Ohio and had lived in Texas for 9 years, working in Lindy and Oxy corporations while residing in Baytown, and then working at Shell Pemex, Deerfield Park, residing in Pasadena. Derek loved Texas and made it his permanent home. He would ask us, "When are you all moving here?" And he wanted to be near his family. In late October 2021, Derek became involved in a relationship with a 36-year-old woman, Vanessa Marino, whom he met online. After dating just a few months, the new relationship quickly turned toxic, and many disputes and breakups developed into an on-again, off-again pattern that continued over the course of 20 months. About 12 months into the relationship, Marina lost her job and her apartment lease was up. So the fix to that problem was moving into Derek's home, living there with her 5-year-old daughter for about 6 months, from December of 2022 until May of 2023. Derek began to see a therapist in order to improve the volatile relationship, but things did not improve, as evidenced by numerous text messages from Derek's phone. Derek went to the Pasadena police in person and filed an assault report against Marino that took place on May 20th of 2023, describing the damage she did to his house, as well as the abuse and physical injuries he sustained to his shoulder and his chest. A Pasadena officer at the front desk documented the report and took images from Derek's phone with his body cam. Derek indicated that he wanted this on record, but feared he would be falsely accused of something, and did not file charges at this time. During our visit to Texas, June 22nd through June 26th of 2023, Miss Marino was no longer living at Derek's home, but Derek indicated they were separated, but still working on their relationship. During our visit, we were told she would be working, but she and her young daughter dined out with us on 3 occasions. In past conversations with Derek, he would mention her name, but was private about the issues going on. So this was actually the first time we ever met her. Later, we learned that after Derek filed the assault report and kicked Miss Marino out at the end of May, he had offered to help her move her things out of his home, but she refused and instead asked to rent out one of his guest rooms. He declined to allow that, but during our June visit, oddly, She left much of her and her child's belongings behind. At the end of our visit, after Derek dropped us off at the airport for our return back to Michigan, we had no idea that we were hugging our son for the last time. The following timeline of July 15th, 2023 is based on evidentiary facts that we know to be true, that are documented in a 287-page summary report of details discovered by a private investigator funded by our family. Miss Marino invited Derek, along with another male friend of hers, to attend an afternoon event at St. Arnold Brewery, downtown Houston. On the way back, there was a serious dispute that began in Derek's truck and continued through the evening hours at Derek's home after returning at approximately 7:38 p.m. Ring cam depicts both of them exited Derek's truck and entered the house through the garage. About 25 minutes later, at 8:15 p.m., ring cam shows Marino arguing with Derek through her open truck window while sitting in Derek's driveway with the motor running. Marino can be heard screaming obscenities and name-calling at Derek as she pulls out of Derek's driveway at approximately 8:15 p.m. Derek can be heard saying, "Go then, just go." Then at approximately 8:30 p.m. timestamp, there is no footage of Marino actually pulling back into the driveway, but the footage reveals Marino's vehicle already parked in the driveway with the lights on and motor running, and emergency vehicles are seen outside of the home. There is missing footage of almost 3 hours between her leaving at approximately 8:30 p.m. and her vehicle back in the driveway, parked and running at approximately 11:30 p.m. while emergency vehicles are outside the house. Marino was in and out of Derek's home several times, all the while a serious argument was going on that she did not admit to until an officer told her that he had video. Although Marino stated she and Derek went to the back patio after getting home and there was discussion about their relationship, her answers to police were vague and confusing without timelines, and patrol officers did not press the issue to clear up any inconsistencies. Photos and facts point to a violent altercation that occurred on the patio, as evidenced by the broken triple pane glass windows and other damages, but police failed to see any significance to the altercation, as well as Derek's assault report that was on record. Marino was the last person to see Derek alive and the first to find him dead. Yet she claims she was not there during the fatal incident. Unbeknown to Marino, a neighbor witness called in his statement to Detective M.P. Jackson to report that he was outside and saw Miss Marino walk erratically up the driveway through the garage entrance. The timeline was apparently of no significance because police never bothered with timelines to figure out if Miss Marino was present during the incident. It remains unanswered and unknown why there is 15-minute delay until Marino called 911 at about 11:15 p.m. The blood of the lower that was found on the lower stair handrail was never tested, so the details of this blood remains unknown, as does the person who cleaned it up. Marino claimed she attended a family graduation party after leaving Derek's home at 8:30 p.m., but her alibi of attending such an event was never checked out by police or proven nor has any family photos ever surfaced on social media in regard to this event. Police never questioned her or asked for the name of Marino's male friend that she claimed was with them at the downtown event all afternoon and gave him a ride there and back. Police never questioned. Neighbors never checked out possible surveillance in the surrounding neighborhood, never talked to family and friends at the party that started at 6 p.m., but Marino's apparently was 3 hours late. Police never bothered with Derek's ring surveillance and tried convincing the family that the angle of the cameras would not pick up people, only cars. Police never took fingerprints, never tested Marino's hands or clothing for gunpowder residue, never checked her guns that she admitted was stored in Derek's gun cabinet. Police never checked the blood discovered on the handrail, nor did the officer supervisor on the scene properly supervise his officers and assure a proper investigation was carried out. Numerous errors are embedded into police reports and police body-worn camera video. There were only 2 body cam videos provided in open records. The first was 1 minute 47 seconds long, and the second one was 7 minutes and 25 seconds long. Total of 9 minutes altogether, 9 minutes 12 seconds total. The female patrol officer on the scene that PPD placed in charge of the death scene was only on the job for 1 year and made numerous errors in her reports that remain uncorrected to date. Surprisingly, this officer was promoted to detective position in a short period of time following this incident. Body cam footage clearly shows another officer took the lead at the scene and, interestingly, did not even turn in a police report. We have struggled for almost 2.5 years now over the numerous discrepancies and unanswered questions surrounding the case. How would any parent feel if faced with our situation? We are parents whose phone numbers were accessible to police, but we did not receive the call. Instead, our daughter was contacted the following morning, 24 hours later, at about 11 a.m. by the medical examiner, assigning our daughter the responsibility of telling us the gut-wrenching news that Derek was found with a fatal gunshot wound the previous night. The medical examiner stated his girlfriend stopped by at 10 p.m., invited Derek to a party, and he turned her down, and then she came back an hour later and found him. This was all the information the family was given. The police and medical examiner's offices were not forthcoming or helpful as we consistently reached out to them, not the other way around. The autopsy was not signed by the medical examiner assistant until 6 months later, and getting documents through the records department became almost impossible, although our requests were put in right away. Finally, after approximately 8 months, our funded investigator was able to retrieve the medical reports, police reports, everything that we needed. It is apparent to us that the responding on-scene patrol officers on scene that night of our son's unnatural death in his home immediately formulated a determination that Derek died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound and ignored all other possibilities of a proper investigation. Police never considered Miss Marino as a suspect, or at the very least, a person of interest. They took her story as fact, and there was no interrogation or checking out her alibi with timelines, and crime scene investigators were not called in to the scene to properly investigate. We've called on the police numerous times to please reopen the case and look into Marino's involvement. We begged an officer to retrieve Derek's phone and that was in safekeeping with the neighbor next door, only to hear that he was doing us a courtesy because we were met with such silence about what had happened. We became the squeaky wheel and continued to ask questions with a letter to the chief of police and several phone calls to some of the officers involved. Soon after, we received a letter from the city attorney informing us of an exemption law that they had sought through the attorney general, which basically aided the police in withholding information during their investigation. The problem is there was not an investigation going on. A few months later, we got a report that they had closed, or I think it was on the police report, that they had closed the case in August of 2023, about 5 weeks after Derek's death. In 2025, in a records request, we discovered an email from MP Jackson, head of the criminal division, now chief of police, that was sent to an officer, assigning him to retrieve evidence from police property room, GSR test, and nail clipping test, and take it to the Harris County Forensic Science Institute for analysis. Apparently, this evidence sat in the property room for an entire year and was never analyzed. I contacted the Pasadena police and reached out to Chief MP Jackson. Then I tried talking to the officer that was assigned to the follow-up, with no response from Jackson, and a text message from the assigned officer stating he had to follow his chain of command. Finally, Officer Sorrell contacted me to say Jackson had been transferred to another department and that a detective would be assigned. Next, I was contacted by a Detective McGregor, who was assigned to do a review of our complaint over the absence of gunpowder residue and stippling, as stated in the autopsy. After approximately 5 months, it became apparent to us that a review that supposedly was intended to investigate the absence of gunpowder residue on Derek's hands, clothing, and in and around the wound, with no stippling present, as well as possible foul play, seems only to be an investigative performance to appease us. McGregor's review has not only failed to produce any proof of relevant answers to our son's case, but has only made matters worse via the speculations and theories that he documented in Derek's file. McGregor concluded a false negative response, while the details surrounding our son's safety pistol are still lacking evidence that Derek fired the gun. There was no suicide note. This was an ongoing domestic violence case, whereas police has turned a blind eye. Derek's assault complaint against Marino of May 30th, 2023, 6 weeks prior to the incident, brought to the family's attention by MP Jackson was totally ignored and never considered as evidence. Despite going through 3 Pasadena police chiefs and their internal affairs department, all has fallen on deaf ears, with the exception of one man, Mr. Eric Sanchez. Through a friend of a friend that my son knew in Texas, I discovered that Mr. Sanchez was an expert of false suicide narratives, and his reporting was widespread on social media. It was approximately the fall of 2025 when I reached out from our home in Michigan to Eric Sanchez for his help and had a conversation with him. And after several more conversations and a viewing of some of his work, we felt confident that Mr. Sanchez was the right choice, and we can rely on him to expose the facts and truths of the details known to us and keep our son's case alive. With all the facts and evidence not being considered, it is obvious that we are expected to believe an assumed suicide theory without question and move on with our lives. There is no comfort in how Derek died. We are overflowing in our grief and pain as we wonder about his last words and thoughts and why his life is being so diminished. We are not able to move on as parents who lived in Derek's home for 5 months to clear out his belongings and list his home for sale, who planned his funeral in just 3 days, who made arrangements to have his body placed on a flight back to Michigan, and then having to bury our only son. There is so much more to Derek's story. Derek was a good soul with compassion, generosity, and kindness towards others. Derek was a good friend, a good neighbor, and a loving son, and would show up, putting his plans aside whenever he saw a need to help. Derek was smart, a problem solver who was raised in a stable home where he was taught all the important things in life and right from wrong. Derek was a hard worker and developed good work ethic at a young age, and he carried that through his entire life. His finances were in order, and he was debt-free except for his mortgage on his new home of only 2 years. It is difficult to comprehend and even put it into words that our son is gone from our lives forever, let alone the suffering we have endured with all the unanswered questions and unproven conclusions during our intense grief. Derek did not wake up that morning thinking this was his last day. Derek went about his routine, working some overtime at his job, tackling many unfinished projects and updates to his new home, confirming a scheduled appointment with his relationship therapist, rearranging an appointment for a haircut with his barber, working out at his gym just 2 days prior, and looking forward to his upcoming cruise in just 4 weeks with his friends from Ohio. With the many evidentiary facts that exist but were ignored, and all of his documented ongoing actions and plans, Derek's family and friends who knew him do not believe this incident was self-inflicted. Unfortunately, law enforcement have maintained an unwillingness to prove it or even investigate it, with silence that speaks volumes, while our lives will never be the same. Derek loved his work, loved living in Texas, and loved his family. and his dog Cooper, and was just starting a new chapter in his life when he moved to his new home in Pasadena. We will never give up seeking truth and justice for Derek.